VR is amazing, and I think everyone should absolutely try it at least once in their life. And I'm not talking about the cheap little lazy VR through like your phone and the VR goggles or whatever like that. I'm talking about a full VR experience, whether it be Steam VR, PC VR, which I guess is the same thing, or some kind of standalone headset like the Quest 2 or something like that. I think everyone should at least try VR once. But here are a few things, a few drawbacks to playing VR, a few things that is almost guaranteed to happen to you on your VR journey as you play through VR, especially if you enjoy it and continue to play many times in the future. So starting off with number one, you're gonna be hitting stuff. You're gonna hit stuff all the time. Unless you're Jeff Bezos or someone who can afford an entire room just for VR, you're almost guaranteed to be hitting stuff constantly. Now, of course, every VR headset pretty much warns you, hey, move some stuff out of your play space and things like that before you start playing. But of course, you can't always do that. Sometimes things get slightly too cramped, and especially if you have pets or kids or someone that's going to be walking through the room a lot of times, you're going to be hitting some stuff. And sometimes it's going to be a person. Sometimes it might be your pet. Sometimes it's going to be something that you didn't want to hit. And sometimes, very rarely, at least in my experience, it's going to actually do damage to your controllers or your headset or something like that. So yeah, you're definitely going to be hitting stuff. I highly recommend being extremely careful, getting as much space as you possibly can in your play space, because when you hit stuff, sometimes you're lucky and it only hits the controllers, and other times you're unlucky and it hits like your knuckles and you scrape it and there's just a gash on your fingers now, and it can be very painful. I've done this many times. I've done this in certain videos before in the past as well. It hurts a lot, so be careful. But yes, that is something that's most likely going to happen to you unless you get a large enough play space. Number two is getting sick. Now, even if you're immune to the VR sickness as some kind of weirdo like that, I don't know anyone that's immune to it. I've heard people are immune to it and they never get sick. First time, second time, 9 millionth time they've ever gotten sick. But you're gonna get sick eventually. At some point in your VR journey, you're gonna push it a little bit too far, and you're gonna get a little bit sick. Even once you get used to it and stuff like that, it doesn't matter if you've gotten used to it or if you've never gotten sick from VR. Eventually, you will most likely push yourself a little bit too far and get sick, and that's why it's very important to kind of pace yourself and make sure you're kind of paying attention to how you're feeling throughout your VR journey, throughout each VR experience, because it could just kind of sneak up on you too, and you won't really expect it. Sometimes it'll be like, why am I feeling sick? I've never felt sick before, and I've done stuff like this before. I don't know what it is, but sometimes it hits a little bit different than other times. So definitely getting sick is something that a lot of people know about. You're almost certainly going to get sick, but you can get used to it, and not every VR game and not every VR experience is going to actually make you sick. Only certain ones do for some reason. But that's only number two. Number three is losing your balance. I don't know if I'm the only one that's like this. Maybe this is just a me thing, but I lose balance a lot in VR, especially when there's like a lot of movement going on in the game and stuff like that, and I have to physically move around in my play space and in my living room or wherever I'm playing at. I tend to lose balance every now and then, so yeah, losing balance is definitely something that's going to happen to you, because you're in the VR world, but you're also in the real world, and you can kind of get tripped up there where you're not looking where you're stepping, obviously, because you're in the virtual world and you're not paying attention to the real world. So maybe you trip on a rug or a carpet, or maybe your pet walked in or something like that and you tripped on your pet. Maybe your pet knocked something off the table and you tripped on that thing that the pet knocked off the table or something like that. And does anyone else have a cat? Anyway, losing balance is definitely something that's going to happen. There is some experiences that are more likely to make you lose balance than others, such as riding through some kind of vehicle. If you're standing while doing that, obviously that might make you sick, but you also may just kind of lose your balance a little bit like that. Another one, if you're afraid of heights and you're up high somewhere in a VR experience, then yeah, you might lose your balance a little bit like that. There's definitely a lot of cases where you might lose your balance, and that's not your fault. It just kind of happens. So number four is kind of similar to number three, but getting immersed. Now I know that sounds like a good thing, but that can actually just as easily be a very bad thing. It's a double-edged sword in some cases. Getting too immersed in these games, these VR games, can be a little bit scary, because before you know it, you could be spending 9 hours, 8 hours. You know, I've heard stories of people spending 10 hours in the game because they got so immersed. Spending 10 hours in VR seems very insane, but if you get very immersed in it, it's kind of similar to just a flat screen game. Plenty of people spend 8 hours, 6 hours, however long, just playing flat screen games such as Call of Duty or something like that on their PC or console. So the same thing can just as easily happen in VR, except it's an entirely different experience. You're getting actually immersed in it. You're gonna actually start feeling things, you know, maybe not necessarily feeling things. That's like a phantom sense. Not everyone gets to that. But you're gonna actually start experiencing these things in a totally different way that you've never been used to before, and you're gonna get immersed. You might try to lean on a table in real life that's not actually there because it's in the game world and not real life. You may actually do that and kind of stumble a little bit like that because you got a little too immersed. You thought the table was actually there. You thought you could rest by physically leaning against it even though it's not physically there, and then oops, you fell. You might have hurt yourself even. Getting too immersed can definitely be a double-edged sword because of course it's going to be a lot of fun getting immersed like that, but it's a double-edged sword because not only may you lose a lot of time that you needed for something else, but you may end up hurting yourself. Number 5, and this is a little bit interesting too because this can happen if you play for 30 minutes, this can happen if you play for hours, depending on how you do it, but getting very sweaty on your face and having that ugly red mark all over your face because you've had the headset on for too long or it was too tight or whatever like that, right? I don't know how many times I've played VR, but every single time I've ever played VR, I've taken the headset off and you could just see a perfect imprint of the thing right on my face. Well, except in the cases where I played for like just a few minutes, but yeah, you're almost always going to get some kind of mark on your face. So definitely if you're going to go to some kind of event like that, maybe you're going to go to church or something like that, maybe you're going to go hang out with some friends later or something, maybe you need to go out to eat with your significant other or something like that, definitely like keep that in mind because if you play, you're going to have a mark on your face. So if you're going to play and then as soon as you're done playing, you're going to go on that date or do this other thing where you're going to be around a lot of people, definitely keep that in mind because you're going to have a mark on your face. It will go away after a couple of minutes, but definitely keep that in mind because you don't want to go to a date or something like that, right? And then you have all this sweat all over your face plus this ugly mark and stuff like that on you. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Red marks and sweatiness on the face, definitely common. I can't tell you how many times this happened to me, but yeah. Those are 5 things that happen to pretty much every single VR player. So with all of that in mind, I'd still very highly recommend it because even though these things are kind of bad in their own little way, they're really not that bad. I think the biggest issue is like actually hitting stuff in real life in VR. So yeah, with all that said, I still highly recommend it. And I hope you guys enjoy VR if you ever try it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video if you watched it all the way through. Yeah. Definitely leave a comment on any other very common things that VR players experience or an uncommon thing that you experience because maybe I can make a video on some uncommon VR experiences that people have or something. I think that could be kind of a fun little thing. So yeah, leave some comments, definitely like the video or share the video or even subscribe. Those things very, very, very much help the channel a ton and I very, very, very much appreciate it. So do all those things like that and remember most importantly to stay asleep.